Imagine being thrown into a den of hungry lions, knowing your only hope for survival is divine intervention. Daniel faced that terrifying reality, yet he emerged unscathed, his miraculous rescue pointing to something far greater than just one man's survival. Incredibly, the story of Daniel in the lion's den foreshadows key moments in the life of Jesus, revealing profound spiritual truths that resonate through time. You see, Daniel, a high-ranking official under King Darius, was distinguished by his exceptional wisdom and integrity. His unwavering devotion to God stirred jealousy among the other officials who conspired to trap him. They manipulated King Darius into passing a decree that for 30 days no one could pray to any god or man except the king. Knowing the consequences, Daniel continued his daily prayers to the God of Israel. Now, caught in the act, Daniel was sentenced to the lion's den, a punishment meant to be fatal. With the den sealed by a stone and the king's signet ring, Daniel was left to what seemed like certain death. But as the night fell, God sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions. At dawn, King Darius rushed to the den, only to find Daniel alive and untouched. In awe of this miraculous deliverance, the king decreed that all must revere the God of Daniel, who rescues and saves in ways beyond human understanding. Here are 10 ways Daniel in the lion's den points to Jesus. Number 1. Innocent yet condemned. You see, Daniel was blameless, both in his service to the king and his devotion to God. His only crime was his faithfulness in prayer, which his enemies used against him. Despite his innocence, he was sentenced to death by being thrown into the lion's den. Like Daniel, Jesus was sinless and lived in complete obedience to God the Father. However, he was falsely accused by religious leaders who were envious of him. Pilate himself declared Jesus innocent, but the crowds demanded his crucifixion. Both Daniel and Jesus suffered undeserved punishment, highlighting their innocence in the face of false accusations. Number 2. Conspired by enemies. The high officials and satraps plotted against Daniel because they were envious of his favor with the king. Unable to find any legitimate fault in him, they created a legal trap by having King Darius sign a decree forbidding prayer to anyone but the king. Knowing Daniel's faithfulness to God, they counted on this law to bring about his downfall. Now, similarly, the religious leaders conspired against Jesus, seeking to destroy him because his teachings and growing popularity threatened their authority. They manipulated the legal system to have him arrested and condemned by the Romans. You see, in both stories, the jealousy of those in power leads to unjust accusations and a plot against the righteous man. Number 3. Thrown into the pit. Daniel was cast into the lion's den, a dark, sealed pit designed to be a place of death. This pit represents a tomb-like environment where Daniel was expected to die, symbolizing the finality of the judgment against him. Jesus, after his crucifixion, was placed in a tomb that was sealed with a large stone. Like Daniel, Jesus was placed in what seemed to be the end, a sealed place of death. The lion's den prefigures the tomb where Jesus would lie after his crucifixion, yet both would emerge victorious. Number 4. Divine deliverance. In the night, God sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions, sparing Daniel's life. His miraculous deliverance from death not only demonstrated God's power, but also vindicated Daniel's faith. You see, Jesus was delivered from death not by avoiding it, but by conquering it through his resurrection. God's ultimate intervention came in raising Jesus from the dead, securing the salvation of all who believe in him. Just as God saved Daniel from certain death, he raised Jesus to show his victory over the grave. Number 5. The morning revelation. At dawn, King Darius rushed to the lion's den, hoping that Daniel might still be alive. To his astonishment, Daniel was unharmed, revealing God's miraculous intervention. The early morning became a moment of revelation and joy. Now, contrast that with Jesus. On the morning of the third day, Jesus' tomb was found empty. Just as Daniel's deliverance was discovered in the early morning, so too was Jesus' resurrection revealed at dawn. The morning represents a new beginning, a symbol of life and hope emerging from death. Number 6, resulting in the exaltation of God's name. You see, after witnessing Daniel's miraculous rescue, King Darius proclaimed a decree that all people in his kingdom should worship and fear the God of Daniel. He acknowledged God's sovereignty and power, declaring that Daniel's God is the living God who endures forever. Now, Jesus' resurrection resulted in the exaltation of his name across the nations. Philippians chapter 2 states that God exalted Jesus to the highest place and gave him the name above all names, so that every knee should bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord. Both Daniel's story and Jesus' resurrection led to the glorification of God on a grand scale. Number 7, trust in God's deliverance. Daniel's unwavering faith is a central theme in this story. Even when faced with the lion's den, he continued to pray and trust in God's ability to save him. His faith is rewarded with divine protection. Jesus, too, displayed complete trust in his Father. Even in the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing the suffering he was about to endure, Jesus prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." Both Daniel and Jesus show that ultimate faith in God leads to deliverance, even when facing the most dire circumstance. Number 8, the role of false accusations. Daniel's enemies sought to bring him down with false accusations, targeting his faithfulness to God as a means of condemning him. Despite their efforts, their plans were thwarted when God intervened on Daniel's behalf. The religious leaders similarly leveled false accusations against Jesus, claiming he blasphemed by calling himself the Son of God. They twisted his words and manipulated the legal system to achieve his death sentence. However, just like Daniel, their plans were ultimately defeated through God's greater plan of salvation in Jesus' resurrection. Number 9, vindication before a ruler. You see, King Darius was bound by his own decree to cast Daniel into the lion's den, though he clearly did not want to do so. However, after seeing Daniel alive, Darius publicly vindicated him, recognizing his innocence and the power of Daniel's God. Similarly, Pilate, the Roman governor, found no fault in Jesus and sought to release him. But under pressure from the Jewish leaders and the crowds, he sentenced Jesus to crucifixion. Despite this, Jesus was ultimately vindicated by God through his resurrection, proving his identity as the Son of God. And number 10, judgment on the wicked. After Daniel's miraculous deliverance, those who had plotted against him were thrown into the lion's den themselves. Unlike Daniel, they were devoured, demonstrating God's judgment against those who conspired to bring down his faithful servant. Jesus' resurrection serves as a foreshadowing of the ultimate judgment. Those who reject Jesus and conspire against God's kingdom will face eternal separation from him. The fates of Daniel's enemies reflect the final judgment that will come upon those who oppose God's purposes. You see, the story of Daniel in the lion's den not only showcases God's power to save, but it also foreshadows the ultimate deliverance found in Jesus, the Messiah. Just as Daniel was preserved from death, Jesus triumphed over the grave, offering us eternal life. These parallels remind us that no situation is beyond God's control, and he works all things for his glory. As we reflect on Daniel's faith in God's intervention, we can find comfort in knowing that Jesus is our ultimate protector and deliverer. The same God who shut the lions' mouths continues to offer salvation through his Son today. If you found this video insightful, please share, like, and subscribe.